And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Jan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. And this outlook will be for Thursday and Friday. We start with the state of the sea ice this Thursday afternoon. We have plenty of ice in the far north. Along the Chukchi Sea coast, there are some polynyas that have opened up near Cape Lisburne and between Point Hope and Kivalina. Strong winds, northeasterly winds, are creating, though, some potential for blowing and drifting snow across this region of the lower Chukchi Sea and then passing through the Bering Strait. Stronger winds along the area around St. Lawrence Island has led to blizzard conditions. Those will continue through Thursday afternoon, so considerable blowing and drifting at snow at times already as of this Wednesday afternoon. Gamble has seen wind gusts 50 to near 60 miles an hour. Further south, the tendency is for this ice to want to shift westward, south and westward, as we go through the next couple of days, as northeasterly and northerly winds will be pushing that ice south and southwestward. Meanwhile, as we get into Bristol Bay, there's enough mild air, some melting is taking place there, as well as up through middle and upper Cook Inlet. We're looking at daytime highs of 35 to 40 degrees up through this region through the upcoming weekend, so that will be the trend here as milder air is pulled back north across especially the southern southeastern quadrants of the mainland and also up into the panhandle. So late tonight, early Thursday morning, low pressure here in the North Pacific will gradually pull northwestward while this low drifts westward toward the western Aleutians. And this front will bring another round of precipitation into the panhandle, especially Thursday afternoon, Thursday night into Friday. And by Thursday afternoon, though, some stronger winds along that immediate front. We'll show you in a moment. And then back to the west here, this low will be crossing in this direction across the Alaska Peninsula, and that low will drift further westward by the time we get into Friday. Not especially strong systems, and this is just scattered lighter snow showers. This is not widespread snow by any means. This little compact system, though, will have some stronger winds coming back up into the southern panhandle on Friday with another round of rain for lower elevations and at sea level. And this kind of pattern is just going to continue into next week. So looking at Thursday, we have south winds with that first frontal boundary coming up. South winds 25-30 knots, areas of Stevens Passage down to Dixon Entrance. Waves 5 feet Stevens Passage, maybe as high as 12 feet Dixon Entrance. North winds, though, on the other side of the front, gusting to 35 knots there, Lynn Canal, with waves of 4 feet. Generally speaking, we could see some gale force southeasterly winds south of Sitka off of Craig, 15 to 17 foot waves, as well as some 35 knot easterly gales out of the icy strait, as well as up at Cape Suckling, again, waves 15 to 17 feet. On Friday, winds will come down in the north, but be picking back up again here, especially along the southern tip and western side of Prince of Wales Island. We're looking at southeast gales of 35 knots with gusts to 50 knots as that little compact low comes in from the south. That means areas of the middle and upper inner channels, northeast to north winds 15 knots with waves a few feet. As we go up along the coast, especially from Sitka on up toward Yakutat, generally easterly winds around 20 to 25 knots with waves of 15 or 16 feet. On Thursday, winds across most of the northwestern Gulf, Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound will be northeasterly, 20 knots Prince William Sound, upper Cook Inlet. But as we drop further south, middle and lower Cook Inlet, 30 to 35 knot northeasterly winds with waves 8-9 feet there. Off the Kenai coast and outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, we're looking at east to northeast gales of 35 to 40 knots with waves running 14 to 17 feet. For Friday, winds will come down, as will waves a little bit. Generally, east winds, Prince William Sound, 25 knots, 4-foot waves. Northeast winds, upper Cook Inlet, 20 knots, but as we drop down through middle and lower Cook Inlet, northeast winds to 30 knots with 7 to 8-foot waves. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, east-southeast winds 25 knots with 14 to 15-foot waves. So with that frontal boundary, low center down here and the frontal boundary extending northeastward from it, northeast flow on Thursday, Shelikof Strait, 40-knot gales, 11-foot waves, 35-knot northeasterly gales, east side of Kodiak Island, 16-foot waves, and those winds turn back more to the north and northwest across the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula at 15 knots, and waves on the North Pacific side could be running 12 feet or so, Sandpoint up to east of Chignik. Generally 3 to 5 foot waves on the Bering side. Winds will come down Friday across the region. Winds around Kodiak Island Friday, east-northeast 20 to 25 knots. And as we go down along the lower half of the Alaska Peninsula, variable winds around 10 knots with that weak low center pulling across there, so that will cause wind and waves to be much less. And then across the Aleutian chain Thursday, initially northwest winds 15 knots around Unalaska, variable winds Nikolsky out toward Atka, and then as we get out west of Adak, winds generally try to come back around to a north or west component at 20 knots. And those winds will come down even further on Friday across the eastern and central Aleutians. We're looking at relatively light winds of only around 10 knots, and they'll be variable at that. Once we get west of Adak, the winds will try to go back to some sort of westerly component at 20 to 25 knots. Along the southwest coast, we have a northeast wind of 25 knots out of Bristol Bay on Thursday, northeast wind 15 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, and then a northeast wind to 30 knots out of Norton Sound coming down along the lower Yukon coast. That's why that ice is going to have a tendency to shift and then pick up again to 30 knots around St. Matthew out of the northeast with waves as high as 15, 16 feet. Lighter winds southeast 50 knots in the Pribilovs. And then for Friday, we continue to see light variable winds only around 10 knots in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. George. East wind 20 knots within Bristol Bay, northeast wind out of Kuskokwim Bay at 15 knots, and generally out of Norton Sound and down along the Yukon Delta coast there, we're looking at 20-knot northeasterly winds and still the potential to want to push that ice south-southwestward. Strongest winds, though, in all the, here in the north are going to be through the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence Island. We have blizzard warnings that will continue into Thursday afternoon for St. Lawrence Island because of 35 to 40-knot northerly winds causing considerable blowing and drifting snow on top of some light snow accumulation. As we go up through the lower Chukchi Sea, the strongest winds are going to be around the Lisburn Peninsula, Point Hope, Cape Lisburn, 35 to 40-knot northeasterly gales. As we go up along the Beaufort Sea coast, look for east-northeast winds 15 knots, Utqiagvik to Kaktovik. Winds will pick up on Friday at Kaktovik to 30 knots. So you can start to get a little blowing, drifting snow again there. Otherwise, northeast winds 20, 25 knots, Prudhoe Bay through Wainwright. And still locally, some 35-knot winds around Cape Lisburn, Point Hope on Friday. And as we drop down through the Bering Strait, generally northeast to north winds right around 25 knots with the strongest winds along the north side of St. Lawrence Island in the vicinity of Gamble. We're looking at north winds on Friday at 30 knots.